to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend recap. We're going to kick it off with Michaela Mayer's ascent from the lightweight division up to just north of super light at welter.
I think she weighed in at about 142 pounds.
Opposite the ring, Italy's own Silvia Bortot, fighter that's been around the block. I expected Michaela Mayer to stop her. I expected Michaela Mayer to get the knockout. She didn't get the knockout, but she did look solid. She did look strong.
Her longtime coach, Coach Al Mitchell, rated the performance a B+. I have to agree, that's the grade I'd give it.
The jab was working. The jab was definitely working. Michaela Mayer got through with some good right hands, strong ones. Silvia wore them well.
She was more durable than I expected.
Because she had been stopped by Belgium's own Oshin Diriyu in a previous fight, I figured Michaela Mayer might be able to get her out of there.
It was not so.
But it was still a solid showing. The jab was definitely working. What I describe as Michaela Mayer's signature punch, her best punch, setting everything up off the jab. The jab was working, bringing the right hand over.
Getting through.
Solid hooks, solid combinations, mid-range to inside. You got the sense that at this new weight, because Michaela Mayer is feeling stronger than she usually does, not as depleted, she wanted to spend a little bit more time in the pocket, having felt what Silvia's got.
Felt her power, felt her punch.
Michaela Mayer felt confident enough to string punches together in the pocket, backing off Silvia Bortot.
Sitting on those shots.
Got the sense that Michaela Mayer wanted to make a statement. She definitely won the fight. She definitely shut out Silvia Bortot. Not a performance that blew me away, but not a performance that you can nitpick but so much. You can't really...
She won practically every single round.
It's hard to say what Michaela Mayer could have done better, what she could have improved upon specifically. I mean, yeah, every so often Silvia got through with a clean punch, but I'd wager that was more due to Michaela Mayer's willingness to sit in the pocket with her and string punches together. She felt what Silvia had. She knew that she could take it.
She knew what she was doing.
She did all right. You can't really complain. Immediately after the fight, she called out Natasha Jonas, saying that she'd like to face her next. She'd like to face her immediately ahead of this weekend's fight. I saw Natasha Jonas express that same willingness.
Passing thoughts.
After this latest performance, I think it's established that going into a Jonas fight, Natasha Jonas will have the edge in power. That of the two, between her and Michaela, Natasha Jonas is the much, much stronger puncher of the two, albeit the older.
The older fighter.
I think Natasha Jonas is somewhere around 38, 39 years old, whereas Michaela's a very spry 33.
Yeah.
I think Natasha Jonas packs a stronger backhand. In the case of Natasha being a southpaw, Natasha's straight left hand seems a lot stronger and more impactful to me than Michaela Mayer's right hand.
Natasha's got power, Michaela's got speed.
Speed, youth, height, and length.
That's what Michaela's got.
Natasha will have home field advantage. I've no doubts the fight will go down in the United Kingdom. That's why Michaela has been spending so much time there. If the fight happens either later on this year or early next year, it will undoubtedly be in the UK as a boxer show.
Michaela can't afford for this fight to be close.
Natasha Jonas being a southpaw, leading with the opposite hand to Michaela, that's a noticeable factor as well. Michaela Mayer's money punch, her best punch, really is the jab more than any other punch, and her dealing with a southpaw may affect that orthodox jab.
Her effectiveness with it.
At the same time, I think Michaela Mayer's got a better engine, better energy reserves than Natasha Jonas at this point. I noticed in the Marie-Eve Dicaire fight, Natasha Jonas looked sluggish.
Pace of the fight got to her.
Michaela Mayer may not have the same thudding power that Natasha Jonas has, those eye-catching backhands, but she does have a good engine, good cardio. I've seldom ever seen Michaela Mayer tired or winded.
So I'm still giving her a slight edge in the Jonas fight.
The right strategy, she can pull it off. We then come to the main event of that same card, Chris Eubank Jr.'s revenge of Liam Smith in Manchester. I went with Chris Eubank Jr. to win the fight. I felt that rematches are often won by the fighter that can make the most adjustments, and that's really Chris. That's more Chris than Liam.
Irrespective of what happened in their initial meeting, rematches are often won by the fighter who can change.
Though Chris was a lot more dominant than I expected him to be, and I expected him to box more, move more than what we got. He was stepping into his punches, stringing together 4 and 5 punch combinations. Not much of a response from a very lethargic Liam Smith.
Chris spent more time in the pocket than I expected him to, likely because he wasn't getting much of a response from Liam.
It was a tense first round where you see both guys are feeling each other out. A lot of respect in the first round, a lot of holding.
A lot of wrestling.
In the first round, and things quickly started heating up in the second. Chris Eubank Jr. took control much faster, much sharper than Liam Smith. Slow to the punch.
Was a step behind Chris.
Was a step behind Chris Eubank Jr. the entirety of this fight. Post-fight, it was said that Liam Smith had to cut a lot of weight.
I saw people talking about ankle problems, leg problems, that he was emaciated, that he had to cut 42 pounds to make the weight for this fight.
And I believe it. I believe that weight could have affected Liam Smith because I believe that weight affected Chris Eubank Jr. in their initial meeting, in their first fight. The camp that he had for the Conor Benn fight, what that might have taken out of him, and the fact that that fight didn't happen, just to go and do another camp for another fighter,
for Liam Smith,
was my opinion that if Chris Eubank Jr. got knocked out in that fight, if his punch resistance seemed to evaporate into thin air, two camps likely were the reason. Weight.
I think that weight affected Chris in the first fight, and I can believe that weight affected Liam in the second.
That in tandem with other outlying factors. As stated, rematches are often won by the fighter who can make the most adjustments, the fighter who can change from one fight going into the other. And Chris Eubank Jr. made a noticeable change in his corner. He's not working with Roy anymore. He's working with Brian Bomac McIntyre.
That was a noticeable change.
No, I wasn't expecting Bomac to reinvent the wheel after just a few weeks with Chris, but what it does accent is Chris had the right idea. He needs to do things differently ahead of the rematch, and he did.
He switched on.
Making the change from Roy Jones Jr. over to Brian McIntyre made a noticeable difference. It helped.
I think the problem with Roy's tutelage is he was training Chris to fight in such a way as if Chris were another Roy Jones Jr.
Like you're going to train him and you're going to mold him into another Roy Jones Jr. And it was noticeable in the 2 or 3 fights that they had together.
It looked more like Chris Eubank Jr. was doing his best impression, his best impersonation of Roy Jones Jr. as opposed to adopting a fluid style.
Style he could use. It seems time has proven him right to enlist the aid of Brian McIntyre for this rematch. He scored a knockdown in the 4th round.
Off a clean uppercut up the middle.
Chris looked like his old self opposite the ring Liam Smith in that second fight, that rematch. He looked like the Chris Eubank Jr. that knocked out Avni Yildirim, that outworked Arthur Abraham, a very old Arthur Abraham, but he looked like his old self. He didn't look like a guy who was trying to imitate Roy
Jones.
Looked like his old self, in tandem with what outlying factors affected Liam Smith. A hard weight cut, perhaps some existing injuries. Two things can be true at the same time. That Chris was a lot more switched on and a lot more up for this rematch than he was their initial meeting, and that Liam
was depleted.
Chris was better in every department in this rematch. Better in every facet. He was faster, sharper, busier, better on his feet.
Better than Liam Smith.
Once Chris would get going, all Liam could do was hang on behind that high guard, that tight guard, trying to weather the storm. Not fast enough to get off a counter and get in. Get this guy off of him.
Too slow, too lethargic.
Yeah, no, the back, I mean, from the way from the back injury last time to when I got over the back injury, you know, I cut 42 pounds. I feel it just it took a toll on my body in this last week. Chris was great, and I was like, Chris was exactly that started that fight exactly how we started the last fight, but then got more confident because he was not being countered and not being, you know, the counters I was trying to throw were miles away, too slow, going over the top of his head. So he got more confident, you know what I mean? And obviously, you can keep throwing. If nothing's coming back, you can throw and throw and throw. So that's why I feel Chris got confidence, because he knew nothing was really coming back. I couldn't really, I just didn't have it in me to counter. So
he was too slow.
Got dropped 2 times en route to a referee stoppage in the 10th. Liam is a tough guy to have hung on for as long as he did, taking the punishment he was taking.
He's a tough customer, but he was never in this fight. Chris was better in every area, better in every department. And it's like Liam said, because he couldn't formulate a counter, because he was too slow to the punch, there wasn't much stopping Chris from stringing punches together, combinations, to just keep throwing punches in bunches, because there's nothing Liam can do about it.
Some people tried to give me a hard time for going with Chris.
That shows what they know. They're 1-1 with each other, Liam Smith and Chris Eubank Jr., both winning their fights emphatically. Should there be a third?
A rubber match? match?
Well, on paper, there would be a precedence for one. On paper, because Liam won the first fight and Chris won the second. On paper, you would assume there should be a tiebreaker, though in reality...
I think they would struggle to sell it. Don't forget this weekend's fight was a pay-per-view. It wasn't a pay-per-view here in America, but it was a pay-per-view in the UK.
Now, I don't know that you can repackage and refurbish this fight again. Sell it to the Brits again.
What's it gonna do?
Selling a third fight would be contingent upon the belief that Liam could do better in a third fight.
Selling it.
The people have to want to see it more than anything. Based on the commercial success, or the lack thereof, of the second fight, this weekend's fight, that'll tell you how likely it is.
There will be a third.
I don't want to see a third fight. I don't want to see a rubber match between them. I'd prefer to see Chris Eubank Jr. take on Conor Benn after Conor Benn's next fight. That's still a very big fight. Chris Eubank Jr. winning this weekend's fight the way that he did, revived.
Resurrected the Conor Benn fight. Just look at Eddie Hearn.
His ass is snapping at the grass to put that thing together. A lot of commercial value in a Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. fight now that Chris has redeemed himself, though. Don't expect that fight to be fought at a catchweight the way it was supposed to be the first time out. Chris ain't going for that.
I think he learned his lesson.
Now, in spite of Chris's dominant showing in the rematch with Liam Smith, Conor Benn says Smith made him look good. What it takes you, 10 rounds to dispatch of someone who's got a broken leg? I'm not really impressed. Eubank, let's get it on. There's unfinished business there. We can do it next. I'll come up to 160. No problem. It's curtains within 4 rounds.
Chris Eubank Jr. responded to that by saying,
Chris, Conor, his immediate fight reaction, he had said that he was not impressed in the slightest. What would you say to him?
I don't know, man. Maybe the juice is still affecting his mental.
There's no love lost between those two. And given the performance that Chris Eubank Jr. put on yesterday, it adds that much more spice to a Conor Benn fight. It's still a very big fight. It's still a money fight because of the legacy of their fathers, their namesake, and the bad blood between them.
Still worth a lot of money, perhaps more now than before. It's more controversial.
Conor Benn didn't exactly convince the boxing community at large that he's innocent. He didn't exactly clear his name.
Even if he's finding a way to work around that.
The anti-doping fiasco that saw their fight canceled, that saw their fight scrapped,
still going on.
It's not over. Conor Benn has stated that he will return to the ring on the Richardson-Hitchens versus Jose Zepeda card September 23rd in Florida, not the United Kingdom, and said his team have made an offer to Ivan Redkach for the fight. Appeal in his UCAT case over 2 positive drug tests last year remains ongoing.
On paper, there's a precedence to do a third fight with Liam Smith. On paper. But in the real world, commercially, the bigger fight by and large is the Conor Benn fight.
Liam Smith rubber match doesn't even come close. And to my knowledge, Chris Eubank Jr. is under no such order, no obligation to fight Liam Smith for a third time. He's not a boxer fighter either. He's not exclusive to Sky Sports. Wasserman does business with both Sky and DAZN.
Chris is a Wasserman fighter, not a boxer fighter. He's not actually one of Ben Shalom's boys.
So by all accounts, he should be free to go where he wants to go. After the fight, Chris called out Conor Benn. He called out Kell Brook, saying, "I'm coming for you, Conor. I'm coming for you, Kell." Kell Brook, who's still coming off that big win over Amir Khan early last year. He hasn't fought since then, though I think he should have.
Kell hasn't officially retired, you understand. And he's been eyeing Conor Benn. He's been eyeing Chris Eubank Jr. But it would have behooved him to get out there and fight some ham and egger just to keep busy.
The way it looks now, if he were to have a fight with either one of them, he'd be coming off over a year layoff, over a year of inactivity. It's been that long since the Amir Khan fight.
He's been at the fights.
He was in attendance at this past weekend's fight, keeping his name out there, his face out there, but he really should take a tune-up fight.
He wants to share the ring with any one of those two guys.
Conor Benn or Chris Eubank Jr. Chris Eubank, who also called out Triple G, saying he's been holding the belts for too long, FYI. Triple G vacated his belts months ago. The WBA went to Erislandy Lara, and the IBF was picked up by Vincenzo Gualtieri, who's going to be facing Yanibek Alimkhanalai very soon. Strange that Chris Eubank Jr. didn't mention Yanibek, didn't mention Vincenzo.
He's not interested in becoming a bona fide champion.
Chris Eubank Jr.'s mind, what's the point in fighting for an alphabet title when he can fight in big money fights without an alphabet title. That's his rationale. That's the logic he's employing. There's actually more money in it for him. In fighting Conor Benn,
Then fighting Vincenzo Gualtieri, then fighting Yanni Beckham-Kanalai.
fighting the winner of their fight, Chris Eubank Jr. knows exactly what he's doing. I wonder if moving forward,
Is he going to stay with Bomac?
I mean, he improved by 100% because the fact that he listened in there. He did what we asked him to do. We told him to work behind that jab, and that jab was pumping. Then he worked his combinations. He wasn't really leaning in. He stayed off the ropes. He kept his hands up. It just perfect. Just perfect. That was beautiful.
Did you always feel that he'd be able to get the stoppage in there tonight? Because Liam's a tough competitor, and even when he knocked down Liam, kept getting back up and trying to make a go of it. Did you always feel that with Chris's attributes, he could get a stoppage in there?
Well, I didn't think about the stoppage until like round 8. You know, when I knew he was dead in there. But going into the fight, you just thought about just getting through the fight with a beautiful performance that he displayed tonight, and so that's the only thing I was worried about.
having trainer Bomac McIntyre in his corner seems to have made a difference in Chris Eubank Jr.'s approach because he was actually listening. He lost with Roy in his corner. He lost the first Liam Smith fight.
So maybe he stops listening.
He hires Brian Bomac McIntyre.
He starts listening.
That bit of it made a difference. No, you don't all of a sudden become a completely different fighter after one fight with a new trainer. That's not how it works, but you are more receptive to instruction, and that in and of itself might make all the difference. That's what I think we saw this weekend, at least in part.
At least for now. The world is Chris Eubank Jr.'s oyster, and he has many, many options moving forward in many ways. He is the biggest name at middleweight.
For the biggest money he is, there are 4 separate champions at this weight, but they don't get paid the way Chris Eubank Jr. gets paid.
He gets paid.
Biggest fight for Chris now is the Conor Benn fight, and we'll see if they make that fight a reality.